When we are looking over the past, especially at specific tragic events stamped into our history, it can be easy to assume we have all the answers and already know all there is to know. The truth is far from this. With every event, every period of time, and every artefact, there is bound to be so much more that we do not know compared to what we do. The Titanic is no different. Even following the hit film, looking at all the history lessons that have been taught and everyone's general knowledge of the 1912 disaster, there are a number of questions that remain unanswered to this day. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we will be taking a look at 3 mysteries surrounding the Titanic, the allegedly unsinkable ship that sunk. Why did the SS Californian turn away from the Titanic? One of the lesser-told stories surrounding the Titanic is that of the SS Californian, a nearby ship that did nothing to aid the Titanic victims, forever solidifying its title as the ship who watched Titanic sink. Still, today, we have no idea why the distress signals were ignored, though the actions of the ship's captain, Captain Stanley Lord, would earn himself a place as a villain in our history books. As with many events we study in history, we will never know the details of that cold April night in 1912, but we can piece together the fragments and bits of the puzzle to gain as near a complete picture as we can. A great deal of our information comes from a testimony from Captain Stanley Lord, the captain of the SS Californian, as well as other officers aboard the ship. Even so, these limited first-hand accounts do not do justice to the lives lost as a result of Captain Lord's decisions. The communication with the Titanic began much earlier on in the night than one may expect. At 7 p.m., April 14, 1912, the SS Californian radio contacted the Titanic to warn the crew about an ice field that the Californian had had to navigate earlier that day. The ship's captain, Stanley Lord, then called the Californian to a halt for the night, pausing the journey due to the path ahead being too dangerous after being surrounded by ice. It was as he signed off duty for the night that he saw the lights of the Titanic just 5 miles away. The Californian did maintain contact with the Titanic at this point, delivering another radio message to warn that they had stopped for the night. However, the signal was too strong and disrupted the usual Titanic communications, so the Californian received the ever-so-lovely response, quote, shut up, I am busy." It was then at 11:30 p.m. that the Californian turned the wireless connections off, though disaster would ensue just 10 minutes later. After hitting the iceberg, a series of rockets were fired from the Titanic. The Californian officers went to wake their captain, who had since gone to bed. The official reports following the event offer mixed descriptions about the rockets that were seen. Lord suggested using Morse code of lights to contact the Titanic, though this action too was criticized, with critics saying the distance between the lights was simply too great to effectively communicate like this. Captain Stanley Lord never attempted to wake the wireless operator. By 2 a.m., April 15, 1912, 8 white rockets were reportedly fired, met with no help by the Californian or Lord himself. At 2:20 a.m., the Titanic sunk. It took until 5:30 a.m. for the Californian to make its way to the Titanic, though again, in a poor series of choices, Lord did not take the most direct route, instead taking a long, winding path to what he would later claim was to the Titanic's last broadcasted position. By the time the SS Californian had arrived at the scene, the Carpathia had taken survivors on board, leaving the Californian to only look through the chaos and destruction that had been left behind. Although Captain Stanley Lord would never face formal legal repercussions for his actions, it is without a doubt that social justice was served. Following the news of the SS Californian's proximity, the actions taken and the poor decisions made by Lord, both the British and American inquiries labelled Lord as, quote, unprofessional and negligible, leaving his career to wilt in the public domain. His life was never the same again. For those who believe in odd twists of fate, the story of the SS Californian is bizarre to say the least. Not long after the 1912 sinking of the Titanic, the SS Californian also disappeared. She was sunk during World War I, but the ship itself was never found. This ironic ending to the story of the SS Californian is strange and peculiar, with some describing it even as poetic. The ease of which the Californian ignored the pleas for help has been heavily criticised, with some blaming Captain Lord for the severity and the high number of losses. Yet the question still remains, why was he so reluctant to help? And can a man who was never on the ship really be responsible for its sinking? The mystery ship. The SS Californian is a ship that, as we have heard, was heavily criticised during the Titanic's disaster. Though some conspiracists are suggesting that a third ship may have been present all along, also failing to help. A good number of survivors of the Titanic have reported seeing lights as they were moving into lifeboats. While the majority of people believe this to be an attempt at Morse code from the SS Californian barely visible on the horizon, others have suggested there was yet another ship acting as a bystander during this tragedy. The Samson. One person who particularly argued for the presence of the Samson and therefore a lesser social punishment for Captain Lord was Leslie Harrison, the General Secretary of the Mercantile Marine Association. In 1963, he wrote an article titled "Clue to the Titanic Ghost Ship," in which he argued that the Californian, 20 miles from the Titanic, was not the closest ship that night, and that one captain was flying under the radar, while Captain Lord of the Californian received the backlash for not helping. Harrison argues that the Samson, a Norwegian seal hunter, was far closer to the Titanic and was also perfectly able, but seemingly unwilling to help. Hendrik Bergathon Nace, a mate on the Samson, said that he had seen the lights and the rockets that night. Nace explains that the Samson made no effort to help as she was sailing in territorial waters, meaning the ship was travelling and hunting illegally. If the ship had helped, it would have been far too easy to catch them out, making the crew liable for prosecution. Apparently, when they continued come morning time, there was no sign of any incidents having taken place, and so the Samson continued on, blissfully unaware as to the Titanic tragedy that had happened just hours before. This story has mostly been labelled as exactly that, a story. Shipping records place the Samson as having docked on April 6th and April 20th in Iceland, and since she could travel at 6 knots, it would be physically impossible for the Samson to have travelled such a great distance in such a short time. Another piece of thread that unravels this theory is that it was not illegal to be hunting seals on the high seas, so what possible reason would stop the Samson from helping? Despite the contrary evidence, many still believe that there was a third ship at the scene, even if it was not the Samson. Could there really have been more ships sat watching without helping at all? Why was the captain speeding? Of course, we all know the Titanic sank as a result of an iceberg in the ship's course, though many question why the Titanic hit the iceberg at all. How had the captain let the ship slip out of control? The accusation here is the loss of the ship was brought about by the excessive speed at which she was navigated. Captain Edward Smith, the captain of the Titanic, has of course been labelled negligent, allowing the speed of the ship to impact the efficiency of his steering, especially in such icy conditions that had caused other ships to stop for the night. Contrary to many popular opinions, he did not speed the ship up, and the ship never hit top speed, but rather maintained the cruising speed, though many think it would have been wise to slow the ship down. Some suggest he was pressured by White Star Line to keep to the ship's existing speed. Others place the blame on Smith himself. It is unsurprising that the Titanic was his last voyage in a long career. There are plenty of myths surrounding what exactly happened to him. Some say he went to save a drowning infant. Others report seeing him take his own life. He had been known as the millionaire's captain, sporting humour and good relationships with the passengers and crew alike, and the Titanic was the one failure in a successful career he had established. The speed of the Titanic was not the only error that could have been avoided. The severe lack of lifeboats was wildly irresponsible, to say the least. Factors like this are to blame on human error too. Even if there is no easily identifiable individual to take the blame, can Captain Edward Smith be blamed for the Titanic sinking? Was he simply following orders delivered from above, or should he have disobeyed and used his best judgment to preserve life how he saw best? All in all, there were a great deal of factors that caused the sinking of the Titanic and that worsened the situation. We may never fully understand the actions individuals took, leaving the pages of history forever incomplete. But what do you make of these Titanic mysteries? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comment section below and help us by growing this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.